parade at 1:30. That's a real sight to behold. Okay, I think we might get started. Now we need lots of kids here. Kids, do you want to gather over a bit closer? They grew simply because it was very, very easy to plant and very easy to harvest, or to pull it, as they used to say. Now, to plant that corn, the farmer would harness a draft horse up to a plough, and he would plough furrows in the ground roughly about 1 metre apart or 3 foot apart. If he was rich enough, he might have a little moldboard plough like this one here. This is a very old one made by a blacksmith called Nettle. So if anybody knows any history about that blacksmith called Nettle, we'd like to hear from you. It's a very unusual plough in that the handle and the beam are all in one piece. Mostly the handles join about there and then the beam is a separate piece. So that's an early English design moldboard plough. This one here is a later design. That's just a mass-produced little pony plough, and you could use that behind your saddle horse. So, okay, he would plough those furrows across the field backwards and forwards 1 metre apart. Mum would come along with the kids and they'd drop those seeds, and we've got some seeds here. They would drop those into those furrows about 1 foot apart, and when they'd finished, they'd hook the draft horses onto a log about 7 foot long, a chain on each end of the log, and they'd drag that at right angles across those furrows. So in other words, if the furrows were across the field this way, they would drag the log across and that would cover the seed up, just like that. Now, there's one I planted yesterday, Gordon, look at that.
Not growing yet, what's wrong? Slow growing.
No moisture under this roof, eh? Okay, now, if there was enough moisture there, it would shoot, or otherwise they'd have to wait until it rained. Now, as soon as the corn came up, so would the weeds, and of course you would have to get rid of the weeds. Now, because those rows are about 3 foot apart, that gave the farmer room to go down between the rows with his hoe and chip the weeds out. After all, the weeds are just competition to the corn plants, and we don't want them sucking moisture away. If they were rich enough, they would have a little horse-drawn scuffler just like this one. Barry's showing us there, the one lever makes it go wider or narrower depending on the width of your rows, and the other one works the depth wheel, which makes it sink into the ground deeper or shallower. Now there is a little attachment that you can put on these, just like a little moldboard that fits onto the side of each outside tine, and they are called hillers. So it's just a wing shaped out like this, and that would have the effect of hilling the soil up against the stalks or the corn plants on either side. And of course that meant that you would have a valley in the middle, right against the stalk, so that when it rains the moisture would be right where you need it, right on the roots of the corn. Okay, now we all know corn grows about 7 foot high. On the top of the stalk we have the male flower, and Gordon's holding that up. It's a little bit worse for wear, but you can get the idea. Now the corn cob is the female flower, and she is nestled, all these leaves at that stage are nice and green, and she's nestled right down beside the stalk. At that stage there are no seeds formed. Now corn doesn't need any bees to pollinate it. It's a self-pollinating plant. So when the male flower drops his pollen down and the breeze blows it around, it comes down onto the female flower, and see those little fine hairs? They travel all the way down to the bottom of the cob, and that's how it is pollinated. That pollen drops onto those little silky hairs, which we call tassel, and then the seeds are formed. Now sometimes you'll see cobs that are missing seeds, or they're an ugly pattern. The rows aren't nice and straight. That's because they've probably been on the outside road, and if the wind was blowing from that direction, they've missed out on a bit of that male pollen. So if you want to cross-pollinate corn, it's a very, very easy job to do. If you've got a patch of one variety over here, a different variety over there, and you want to cross them, all you need to do is put a plastic bag over his head, get a bit of pollen from the other variety and sprinkle it over yourself, and that's how it's done. And that's the way they still do it today. So it's an easy job to make a hybrid corn. Now, because they were in isolated areas, those farmers, and we're talking about the period from about 1850, which was settlement period, up to the 1900s, which was Federation period. So that 50 years that we're talking about, nothing much changed. People still relied on horse-drawn vehicles. They still had kerosene lamps, which meant there was no radio, TV or iPods. And nothing much changed. I mean, the towns were gradually growing. The farmers were gradually putting their buildings up and getting their fences organised, and more of them were coming, but still things remained much the same. So they couldn't just run down to Bunnings and buy what they wanted like we do today. So they had to make use of everything they had on hand. And this tassel here, they made very good use of that. They used to smoke it. Now, Gordon will get a bit of a cob here and just show you how they used to make what we call a corn cob pipe. We're running short on cobs, Gordon. Take that handle off there. We'll just pull the handle off. Okay, Barry's going to show us. You'll probably have trouble breaking that, but suppose that is the pipe. You would hollow the centre out, drill a hole in the side, and then get a bit of cane about 4 or 5 inches long, just like the cane we used to use at school for basket weaving, and you could draw the smoke through that cane. You stuff the tassel inside there and light her up, and you're on a high for the rest of the day. Wrap it in newspaper. Well, we heard yesterday. We heard all about horse manure yesterday and gully root, and there was another one, Barry, wasn't there? What was that?
Yeah, there was another one, yeah.
I just can't remember what it was, but that's what they used to do. Now, the cobs themselves, of course, they made good use of those cobs. A handle for the old-fashioned soldering iron that insulated your hand against the heat. We used to use those to solder our downpipes and gutters. Today we use Celastic, and the ants come and eat it. A handle for a file. Have we got a file there? Yeah, here's a file. Now, where's all the children today? Kids, do you know what a file is used for? A file is for smoothing out metal, and a rasp is for smoothing out wood. So, an excellent handle. Another one here is just make a handle out of a bit of wire, shove it into the end of the cob, soak that in a jam tin full of lighting kerosene, and light it up and use it as a lantern at night time. When I was a kid, it was always after dark when Grandad finished milking the cows. I'd have to light one of these up to show him the way down to the piggery, because he'd have a Chinese yoke on his shoulder with 2 kerosene tins full of separated milk, and off we'd go down to the piggery. There'd be hot ashes dropping down on my hand and I'd be jumping around, but that's how it was done. What do you got there, Gordon? A toilet roll holder. See that cob in the middle? But in my day, we didn't have toilet paper, we had newspaper. So you could sit on the throne and read the daily news while you were there. And what was that one that lady told us yesterday, Barry?
Instead of using newspaper.
Instead of newspaper.
Oh yeah, they use the cobs.
Yeah.
The cobs. Nearly brings tears to your eyes, doesn't it, eh?
Just thinking about it.
Just thinking about it. There's a woman here from America. She said over there we used to use them twice. Turn it around and use the other side. One for the brown ones and one for the good ones.
So that's what they did. They had a kerosene tin of corn cobs in the dunny or the thunderbox, and that's what they used. Okay, again, the husk from around the cob. That's what we call the husk. That's nice and dry, nice and soft. It probably has been frosted, and that's what they used to do. They'd wait for the first or second frost before they picked the corn. It made it much easier to pull off the stalk, and they used to stuff their pillowcases and mattresses full of corn husks and sleep on them. And I guess if you'd been working on the farm all day, you'd be tired enough to sleep on anything, even a bed of nails. Okay, now, the farmer, of course, grew this corn to make money. It was a cash crop, the same as we do today. We grow our produce to sell it to make money. Now, nobody would buy the corn still on the cob. They had to take that grain off the cob, put it into a hessian bag. When the bag was filled up, they'd sew it up, load it onto the wagon, and off to the produce store or the market to sell it. Now Barry will just show us here, or Gordon. Here we go, Gordon. These ones haven't been frosted. We picked these early this year, but see how Gordon's just rolling that around between his fingers and thumbs, and he's taking all that grain off the cob. And there we have an empty cob. So that's what they would do. And when they had a wagon load, off they'd go to sell it. Now eventually, to make things a little bit easier, a very clever bloke invented a corn sheller. This little machine here is probably about a 1930 model, made in Canada by Massey Harris. It's made of steel. The earlier ones that were made in about 1850 onwards were made of wood or timber. But it's very difficult these days to find a good wooden corn sheller. So we use the steel one, and Barry's going to wind it up to speed. Then he'll drop the cobs in, big end first. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at those beautiful golden grains of corn. Now that's just 4 cobs that we used. And here we have the empty cob, only a couple of grains left on it. If that had have been frosted, there'd be no grains left on it. It's just because you need those frosts to really dry it off and make it hard. Okay, now, of course, that speeded the job up. You still had skin on your hands instead of taking it off by hand. And that enabled you to grow perhaps more corn, plant larger acreages. But the farmer would always keep some of that corn back home on the farm. Can I have that, Gordon? There we go. That's our cracked corn. And that's quite safe to feed to your farm animals, whether it be cows or goats or horses or chickens or pigs, whatever. Has anybody ever heard of grits? How many people used to watch the Beverly Hillbillies? Jed Clampett used to have possum and grits, didn't he, together? That is the grain and the cob. He's going to mix it all up together. Now, by adding the cob, it's mainly fibre. There's not a lot of protein in it, but by adding that fibre, it helps to reduce that swelling up problem in their stomach. It also gets rid of all those cobs that are lying around. So it's very, very useful, and you'd have that piston going around to drive it. But remember, we're talking about that settlement to federation period. During that time, These machines out here that are called horse Whims or horse gears, do you know how to spell Whim? It's W-H-I-M. You remember that? Okay, now these horse Whims came from England and America. Later on we did start making them here in Australia. The one just out here that we'll be using in a minute was made in North Melbourne. The one behind us here was made in Sydney. But the very first ones were imported from England and America. So just imagine people, the boom it would have been to the farmers, or the benefit that they would have had. Instead of winding these machines by hand, all you had to do was hook up your draft horse, and through the gearing it could drive it. Barry, that's much easier than winding by hand, isn't it? She's not feeding in too well. There she goes. She's crunching it in now. No, don't put your hand down in there. How about a big hand for Jasper, people? Oh, here he goes again. Here he goes. He's not finished yet. We'll show you the sample that comes out of that when he stops. Operated on the Darling Downs, was just up the road here at Geum, and that took place in 1863. Okay, so Jasper's going around through the gearing and through the belt. He's driving that cream separator, and if you look very carefully, you will see the cream dribble out the top spout and the separated milk come out the bottom spout. Now you may not see another horse-driven separator anywhere in Australia. So there we go, look at that cream coming out. Isn't that wonderful? What do you think about that?
With 4 horses going round. So that's fairly rare in the Lions Club at Killarney, and the proceeds go to Care Flight Helicopter. And last year I think he raised in the vicinity of $10,000. So I think it's pretty commendable effort. Thank you.
They're up to their 5th generation. And Andrew Tulloch is now at the helm of the business. And we've been in contact with Andrew, and he's told us all the history about this machine. The thing is, they only made one of them, and this is it. So it's a very, very rare machine. Now the story goes that in 1890, when it was made, the stock route from Western Queensland used to go down through New South Wales on their way to Melbourne, which was the main shipping port. They would all camp at a little town called Narromine, which is on the Macquarie River. It's a little bit southwest of Dubbo. Now that was the common camping ground for the drovers, the bullock team drivers and the horse team drivers. And when the drovers came through, sometimes they'd have 1,000 head of cattle, 3,000 or 4,000 head of sheep. They'd all camp there, the stock would drink at the Macquarie River, and then they'd move on. The problem was that the Macquarie River was also the town water supply. So you imagine 1,000 head of cattle coming down to the river. Those of you who are country people, you know that a cow's never content to drink at the water's edge. She walks into it, bogs it up. When her feet get wet, she gets the urge, up goes her tail. Multiply that by 1,000 head and you've got a huge pollution problem. So the Shire engineer decided he'd have to do something about this. So he designed this pump on paper. He made arrangements with the Stock Route Board to pay for it, and they said, okay, if you're only going to build one of them, we'll pay for it. After that, you've got to pay for them yourself and sell them. So he made arrangements with Tulloch's to go ahead and build the machine. When it was built, they placed it on the bank of the river and they actually fenced the river off. Now, when the drovers got to know about it, they'd send a good man like David here and a good horse like Jasper 3 or 4 hours ahead of the mob, so that by the time the mob arrived, they'd have the water pumped out of the river and they just pumped it into open drains in the ground, just like a bore drain. Obviously, you couldn't have enough troughs like that wooden one up there to water 1,000 head of cattle. So that's what they did. They just delved these furrows in the ground, and that completely solved the problem. So it was a huge success, and I can't believe that, no more of them were made, but it has been confirmed that this was the only one they made. Now, you probably wonder how we come to get it. One of our members was holidaying in New South Wales. He stayed at the Narromine Motel, and in a little cactus garden in the front of the driveway, this old rusty relic was sitting there. He liked it so much, he managed to get the manager of the motel to let him have it, swapped him for a plough, because after all, he only wanted a garden ornament. We brought it back here to Highfields Pioneer Village, restored it, and you'll see how it works. Righto, David. You'll see the water coming out of the pipe up there at the old ship's tank. It takes a little while to get the air out of the system, but it does pump a very good quantity of water. It is capable of pumping 4,000 gallons an hour. It's a positive displacement pump, and it will push water for 4 miles, believe it or not. A pump made in 1890, powered by one horse, can do that. We haven't come very far, have we? You could probably buy a little Honda with a firefighting pump on it. You'd go to Motor Mecca, buy it, carry it home under one arm, but I can guarantee you in 100 years' time it won't be working like this one. For those of you guys who are mechanically minded, you'll see that mechanism in there that makes those pistons go from side to side. That is called a Scotch yoke, and it was commonly used on steam engines. It's a very frictionless type of drive. You'll also see a lot of water leaking past those pistons, and you probably think that we done a crappy job of restoring it, but we didn't. There's no rings on those pistons. The water does the lubricating, so it's absolutely imperative that that water leaks down past those pistons. You're still going, mate. You haven't filled those drains yet. How about a big hand for him, Pilu? They were called a root cutter, and of course they were used for cutting up all sorts of root plants to make fodder for cattle or pigs or whatever. In Australia here they were very, very useful for cutting up cattle pumpkins. During the drought you could cut all your cattle pumpkins, your melons or whatever, and feed them to your cattle or your pigs. Now it's a slow machine, it's not a fast machine. By the way, I must tell you, this horse whim here, as I said before, was made in North Melbourne. It's a fairly old one, probably about 1890 or so. But the other day we had a lady here. She was getting on a bit, but she told me that when she was a little girl, her father bolted a tractor seat on there, just like one of those ones over there. She had to sit there with a stick and keep prodding the horse along. You just imagine her toes going through those gears. Ouch, hey, very dangerous. Cattle pumpkin in there, and it's slicing them up beautifully. We should ring up Flo and get her to come and make some pumpkin scones, I reckon. That's it. Does a good job, doesn't it? I can tell you, starving cattle just go berserk over this sort of food. things happen when you're doing demonstrations with old gear. It's unavoidable, and that's exactly how it was in the old days. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Barry. Yeah, you can have some. Do you want to taste some? No thanks. Here it comes.
Village here. Righto, there you are. See, it's for the village. Who's got $20 for him anywhere? 20, 18. Well, who's got 15? $15 anywhere? 15. Well, who's got 10 and go? $10. Thank you very much. At $10, putting out $10. $10. Put your hand in the air if you want a bid and you want to go home with a pumpkin. You put your $10. At $10. At $10, bidding out $10. $10, bidding out 10. At 11. At $11, you're bidding out $11. You're bidding out 11. Go on, you're running second over here. At $11. At $11, you're bidding out $11. You're bidding out 11 a bid. At 11 a bid. At $11, you're bidding out $11. You're bidding out 11. At $11. What am I, a bit under the rate, am I? It's worth more than that. Well, you've got another dollar. You can give me $12. Thank you. At 12. At $12, bidding out 13. $13. At $13, bidding out 13. At $13, bidding out 13. At 13. I thought you'd be knocking me down for this one today. At $13 only. At $13, you're bidding out $13. Done. And 14. $14. Don't pull up yet. At 14. Don't shake your head like that. You go this way. $15. $15, bidding out 15. At $15, bidding out 15. At 16. $16. At $16, 17. $17, bidding out 17. At $17, you're bidding out $17. Done. $17. At $17 done. Look, you could split it up for this one. $18. $19. You could $20. If for that sort of money, 21. Now what are you pulling up? At $21 done. Done and finish it. $21 done. And it's gone to the lady over here. Thank you very, very much.